Hello, friends. Today you'll witness a confession that unravels a decade of hidden trust. This is Mara Ellis, a security liaison whose life anchored on one man. Behind her controlled words lies a fracture no report can contain. Watch closely. The camera's red light blinks steadily in the dim glow of Mara's apartment, a small, unblinking eye perched on the tripod beside her desk. She sits straight-backed in the worn leather chair, her liaison badge clipped neatly to her blouse, hair pulled into a low bun that speaks of order amid the coastal fog pressing against the window. Rain taps insistently on the glass, a rhythmic underscore to her measured breaths. She adjusts the frame slightly, ensuring the locked journal, its leather cover etched with faint scratches from years of guarded entries, peeks into view at the edge of the shot, half hidden like a secret not quite ready to spill. "This is Mara Ellis," she begins, voice level, practiced from countless briefings in sterile conference rooms. "For the record, I'm a liaison officer with the Metropolitan Security Detail. My days are spent bridging gaps between agencies, between facts and the fragile trust people place in them. It's precise work, controlled." Her fingers interlace on the desk, knuckles whitening just a fraction as she chooses her words, threading them like a careful suture. She can't rush this. The confession needs framing, a scaffold to hold the weight without crumbling. She pauses, not empty but weighted, leaning forward as if drawing the viewer into her orbit. And then there's Ian Calder, my anchor for over a decade. We met in the field back when secrets were currency, traded in whispers over late-night coffees and waterfront dives. He'd listen, really listen, to the parts I couldn't log in reports. The fractures from ops gone sideways, the personal toll I kept compartmentalized. Ian was the one who made it feel safe to let a sliver out. He held it, never weaponized it. Her gaze flickers to the journal, its clasp glinting under the lamp. A silent sentinel. Does opening this door mean handing over the key? The rain intensifies, blurring the city lights beyond, and a subtle tremor edges into her tone. Not accusation yet, but the first hint of fracture. Lately, though, something's shifted. A distance in his silences, a shadow where there used to be certainty. I'm starting this record because trust like that. It's the foundation. But what if it's eroding? What if the very things I shared are about to surface, unbidden? She exhales, control slipping toward something sharper, anticipatory, like the storm gathering offshore. The lens captures the micro-twitch at her jaw, the unspoken calculus. Reveal enough to prepare, but not so much that the scar rips wide open. Can she navigate this without the ground giving way beneath her? The rain had eased to a fine mist that evening, cloaking the waterfront in a soft, forgiving haze. Mara walked beside Ian, their footsteps sinking on the uneven cobblestones, a rhythm that felt like the pulse of something unbreakable. The city lights blurred across the water, turning the harbor into a shimmering secret they alone could decipher. She glanced at him, his profile sharp against the dim glow, and felt that familiar warmth bloom in her chest, the kind that wrapped around old wounds without asking permission. "I never told anyone about the fire," she said, her voice low, testing the air between them. It was the summer she'd lost her parents, the one detail she'd buried deeper than the ashes. Ian didn't flinch. He just nodded, his hand brushing hers as they paused by the railing. The way the smoke clawed at everything. I thought if I said it out loud, it'd swallow me whole. Her words hung there, vulnerable and raw. But in his eyes, she saw only reflection, no judgment, no weapon. He turned to her, the mist beating on his lashes. "I get it. Secrets like that, they're not burdens if you share the weight." Then he leaned closer, voice dropping to match hers. "That promotion? The one I turned down last year? It wasn't ambition. It was fear. Fear I'd become the kind of person who trades trust for a corner office. His confession spilled out easy, like breath, and Mara felt it settle into her, stitching something loose inside. They were mirrors then, edges aligning, the world narrowing to this stretch of promenade where truths could breathe without shattering. Their steps resumed, deliberate and unhurried, echoing off the water like a promise. The warmth lingered, a quiet fire against the chill. But as they rounded the bend toward the shadowed pier, a faint unease stirred in Mara's gut. Ian's laugh faded into the night. And for a split second, the mist seemed to thicken, blurring not just the lights, but the certainty of the moment. Could this intimacy, so sweetly exposed, endure the storm she couldn't yet see gathering? Mara leaned against the kitchen counter in her apartment, the rain pattering against the window like hesitant fingers. Ian sat across from her at the small table, scrolling through his phone, the screen's glow casting sharp shadows on his face. She watched him, the way his thumb paused mid-swipe, as if the world beyond it had suddenly grown too heavy. "You've been quiet lately," she said finally, her voice steady but laced with the undercurrent of something unspoken. It wasn't an accusation, just an observation, or so she told herself. But inside, anxiety coiled tighter, a familiar knot in her chest that she hadn't felt since those early days of guarding her secrets. Ian glanced up, his eyes meeting hers for a beat before sliding away. "Just work stuff. Nothing major." His words came out clipped, restrained, like he was measuring them before release. No smile, no lean in, no echo of their old rhythm. She nodded, stirring her tea absently, but the steam rising blurred the edge of her reflection in the window. There, a faint crack in the glass from last winter's storm, spiderwebbing outward. It caught her gaze, mirroring the subtle fracture she sensed in him, in them. Her heart quickened, the anxiety sharpening into something warier, a suspicion that whispered, "Is this the start? The moment when trust, so carefully locked away, begins to splinter?" She wanted to press, to ask what hid behind that distance, but the words stuck. What if probing only widened the gap? What if silence let it fester? Ian's chair scraped as he stood, murmuring about an early night. She watched him go, the knot in her chest pulling tighter, the rain's rhythm now a drumbeat of doubt. How deep did this detachment run? Rain slicked the windows of Mara's apartment, blurring the neon glow of the coastal city below. She sat at her desk, the locked journal heavy in her lap, its leather spine a relic of the secrets she'd guarded like a fortress. The video she'd filmed earlier that day, her raw confession about the buried trauma, still hummed in her mind, unshared, private. Until now. Her phone buzzed, insistent, a text from an unknown number. "Check the forum. Your words are everywhere." Heart slamming, Mara opened her browser. There it was, splashed across a local news aggregator, fragments of her testimony, twisted into headlines. Liaison officer exposes dark past in leaked video. Quotes ripped from context, her voice, vulnerable, echoing betrayal by a faceless ex. But she knew. Ian. Only he had access to that file, that trust. Shock hit first, a cold wave crashing through her chest. Her fingers tightened on the journal, the lock digging into her palm like an accusation. How? Why? The room spun, the rain's patter mocking her isolation. She scrolled, fury igniting, comments piling up, colleagues' names tagged, her professional life fracturing in real time. A message from her supervisor. "We need to talk. Now." Ripples spreading, unstoppable. Gritting her teeth, she hurled the phone across the desk. "Ian, you bastard," she whispered, voice raw. The journal fell open slightly, pages whispering secrets she could no longer contain. Panic clawed in, exposure like acid, burning bridges she'd built so carefully. What now? Hide? Run? No. The fear twisted into something sharper, a spark of resolve. She couldn't let this define her end. Grabbing her coat, she eyed the door, the bridge outside waiting in the downpour. She had to confront him, reclaim what was hers. But could she stem the flood before it drowned everything? The rain-slicked window behind Ian framed the blurred lights of the waterfront, turning his silhouette into a watery ghost. Mara stood in the doorway of his cramped apartment, her coat dripping onto the threshold, fists clenched at her sides. The air between them hummed with the weight of what she'd discovered that morning. The leaked video, her words twisted into headlines, her journal's secrets splashed across feeds like spilled ink. Why? The word burst from her, raw and sharp, slicing through the silence. She stepped inside, slamming the door harder than she meant to. Her voice trembled on the edge of fury. "You were the one person I trusted, my anchor. And you handed it all over. For what? Some pity party when your life crumbled?" Ian leaned against the kitchen counter, arms crossed, his eyes fixed on the floor. He looked smaller than she remembered, shadows carving hollows under his cheekbones. "Mara, I don't." She cut him off, advancing until the space between them shrank to a breath. Her chest heaved, shock fueling the fire in her veins, making her skin prickle. "You promised. That night, after everything, you said it stayed with us, locked away. But you released it. My pain, my story, you weaponized it. Tell me why, Ian. Give me that much." He shifted, glancing toward the hallway mirror. A cheap thrift store find, its surface already cracked from some forgotten argument. His reflection fractured there, just as hers did when she caught it. Eyes wild, face flushed, the poised liaison officer splintered into something jagged and exposed. "It wasn't like that," he murmured, voice low, evasive. "I was drowning. The job loss, the debt. I needed leverage. A contact promised to help if I gave them something real. Your testimony, it was already recorded. I thought—" "You thought?" Her laugh was bitter, cracking like glass underfoot. The anger crested, then ebbed, leaving a hollow ache that clawed at her ribs. She pressed a hand to her sternum, as if to hold it in, but the pain seeped through, revealing the deeper wound, the betrayal that echoed her old traumas. Tears stung her eyes, unbidden. "You didn't think about me, about what this does. My career's in shreds, Ian. People I work with, they look at me like I'm broken now, exposed." He reached out, tentative, but she recoiled, the mirror catching the motion in its shards. Her face multiplied, each piece a distorted echo of the woman she'd armored so carefully. "I'm sorry," he whispered, the words hanging limp, inadequate. "I panicked. It was a mistake." The room spun with unspoken accusations, the public storm now funneling into this intimate wreckage. Mara held his gaze, searching for the truth he'd buried, her resolve hardening even as vulnerability threatened to swallow her whole. Could she pull it free without shattering completely? The question lingered, unanswered, as the rain drummed on. Rain pattered against the therapy office window, a relentless murmur that matched the hollow thrum in Mara's chest. She sat rigid on the edge of the couch, fingers twisting the hem of her damp coat, the city's chill clinging to her like accusation. Lena Ortiz leaned forward in her armchair, her expression a steady anchor. Calm eyes, notepad balanced on her knee, no judgment in the soft lamplight. "Ian, he leaked it. Mara said, the words scraping out like gravel. Her voice cracked on his name, fury surging first, hot and sharp, twisting her gut. The confession video, meant for her eyes only, now viral fodder. Her family's buried shame, the assault she'd survived at 18, all splayed out for strangers to dissect. Shame followed fast, a choking wave, flushing her cheeks as she imagined the whispers at work, the sidelong glances. He knew everything, swore he'd never. And now? It's everywhere. My career's hanging by a thread. I feel exposed, like I've got nothing left to hide behind. Lena nodded, her voice gentle but firm. What does that exposure feel like right now, Mara? In your body? Mara's gaze drifted to the mirror on the far wall, a sleek frame in the muted room. But it wasn't whole. A hairline fracture snaked across the glass, spiderwebbing from some unseen impact, distorting her reflection into fractured shards. She stared at it, her own face splintered, one eye fierce with rage, another shadowed by humiliation. Like I'm breaking, she whispered, empty inside, angry at him, but mostly at myself for trusting, for thinking I could keep it locked away forever. The shame peaked then, a vice around her throat. But Lena's presence, unflinching, patient, held space. You're not broken, Mara. You're here, naming it. That's the start. Mara exhaled, the anger ebbing into something firmer, a spark of resolve igniting beneath the ache. She straightened, meeting Lena's eyes. I can't just crumble. I need a way through this, to face it without losing who I am. The words felt tentative, a first step across an abyss, but they carried weight. Trust flickered, fragile as the rain outside. Could she lean into this? Let help mend the cracks without shattering completely? Lena smiled faintly. Let's map that path together. What might the first move look like? The rain pattered against the cafe window like hesitant fingers, blurring the coastal sprawl beyond. Mara sat across from Jules, her fingers tracing the edge of her untouched coffee cup, the steam curling up like unspoken doubts. Jules leaned forward, notebook closed on the table between them. A deliberate choice, no pen in hand, no frantic scribbles to capture her words. I've been following the leak, Jules said, voice steady, eyes meeting Mara's, without the predatory glint she'd come to dread in reporters. Not to sensationalize it, but to add context. Your side, unfiltered. We could collaborate. Interviews, your footage, my research. I handle the framing, but you control the release. No surprises. Mara's pulse quickened, a familiar tightness coiling in her chest. Collaboration. The word tasted like Ian's promises, sweet until shattered. She glanced at her bag, where the locked journal nestled inside, its brass keychain glinting under the dim light, a relic of secrets meant to stay sealed. Unlocking it for Jules? The fear gripped her. What if this fresh face twisted her truths into another blade? Why me? Mara asked, her voice low, edged with suspicion. You've got sources everywhere. What's in it for you besides a story? Jules didn't flinch. Because I've seen what happens when one side dominates the narrative. Your ex-friend, Ian, didn't just betray you. He erased you. I want to help rebuild that. But only if you're in, fully. Boundaries first. You approve every draft. Veto anything. It's your story, Mara. I'm just the bridge. The word hung there, evoking the rain-slicked span over the harbor she'd crossed earlier, steps heavy with isolation. Doubt warred inside her, visions of headlines weaponizing her pain anew, of vulnerability spilling out uncontrollably. Yet Jules's gaze held no hunger, only a quiet respect. like someone who'd navigated her own leaks and lived to question them. Mara exhaled, fingers brushing the journal's lock through the bag's fabric. It felt heavier now, not just a barrier, but a choice. "Show me an outline," she said finally, the words tentative, testing. "And if it feels off, we stop." Jules nodded, a small smile breaking through. "Deal. Your call, always." As they talked details, the rain eased, and Mara's shoulders loosened fractionally. Not trust, not yet, but a cautious crack in the door. Could she share without inviting another fracture? The question lingered, unanswered, as the lock in her bag seemed to hum with possibility. But the journal mocks her hesitation, its pages a map of secrets she chose to voice now, on her terms. Swallowing hard, she leans closer, the light catching the faint tremor in her hands. The betrayal? It shattered me. Not just the exposure, but realizing how much I gave away, piece by piece. Her voice steadies, a deliberate push against the silence. Conscious now, she names it. The shame that clawed at her nights, the fear that every word could be twisted again. Yet here she is, filming, choosing. I confronted him, demanded why, and in that moment, I saw my own fractures. But I'm not broken beyond repair. A pause, her gaze softening as she thinks of the others, the ones who didn't weaponize her trust. Lena listened without judgment, helped me map the pain, set boundaries I didn't know I needed. And Jules, she offered a way forward, not to take my story, but to share it with me, transparently. They're not him. They're proof that trust can be rebuilt, carefully. The emotion shifts, silence yielding to a quiet resolve, her posture straightening as courage takes root. She touches the journal's cover, not opening it further, but acknowledging its weight. Her truths, still hers to hold. This is my response. Not hiding, not surrendering. I'm telling it my way. The question lingers unspoken in the air between her and the lens. Can she bear this without losing herself again? The red light holds, waiting. Rain slicked, the bridge arched over the restless harbor like a spine bent under storm's weight. Mara stood at its center, coat collar turned up against the downpour, her breath fogging the chill air. Water drummed on the metal grating, pooling in shallow mirrors at her feet, distorted glimpses of her face, fractured by ripples. She leaned on the railing, gaze fixed on one such puddle, where her reflection wavered. Eyes shadowed, lips pressed thin, a woman piecing herself from shards. The fear coiled tight in her chest, a familiar vice. Ian's betrayal still echoed. Secrets spilled like ink in water, staining everything. What if sharing again invited the blade? What if her words twisted in others' hands, carving deeper wounds? She could retreat, lock it all back inside, let silence be her armor. But the pull tugged harder now, a quiet insistence born in Lena's office, where vulnerability had been named not as fracture but as deliberate step. And Jules, his steady questions, respecting the lines she drew, had shown her edges could hold. Doubt flooded her like the rain, cold and unrelenting. Can I trust myself this much? To bear the knowing of her own heart without the story slipping free? Her fingers gripped the rail, knuckles white as thunder grumbled offshore. The bridge swayed faintly under wind's shove, a threshold suspended between shadowed past and fogged future. Isolation had kept her safe, but hollow, echoes of unspoken truths bouncing in her skull. She straightened, rain tracing paths down her cheeks like unshed tears. No more hiding. The next telling would be hers, a public frame she built, words measured, truths claimed. Lena's calm voice surfaced in her mind. Boundaries aren't walls. They're bridges you cross on your terms. Jules nodded in memory. His notebook paused, waiting for her lead. Trust wasn't handed over. It rooted in this choice, in the circle she was forging. Honest, bounded, real. Mara exhaled, resolve settling like ballast. She turned from the puddle's blur, stepping forward into the storm's heart. The rain washed cleaner now, carrying her toward whatever shore waited. But the question lingered, unanswered in the downpour. Could she open the story without losing its reins? The rain has eased to a fine mist over the coastal sprawl, streetlights haloing the wet pavement like hesitant confessions. Mara steps out from Lena's office, her coat collar turned up against the chill, fingers twitching toward her bag where the locked journal rests. Heavy, unyielding, a relic she hasn't opened since the bridge. Anxiety coils in her chest, sharp as the wind off the harbor. Another interview request from a colleague, probing for the full story, and Jules's text buzzing. Ready if you are, but your call. The pressure builds, a tide pulling at her edges. Show them everything, or hold the line. Cut 2. Mara's apartment, dawn light filtering through half-drawn blinds. She paces the kitchen, phone in hand, dialing Ian's number for the first time since the fracture. No answer. She exhales, sets it down, and pulls out the journal, tracing the lock with her thumb. Not to unlock it, not yet, but to remind herself, this is mine. She texts Jules instead. Meet at the waterfront cafe. Partial truth, my terms. Action surges. She grabs her keys, strides out, the door clicking shut like a boundary sealed. Quick cuts. At the cafe, steam rising from mugs, Jules leans in, notebook open, but pen still. What do you want to say? Mara hesitates, pulse racing, anxiety flickering in her eyes, then leans forward, voice steady. The betrayal broke me open, but I'm the one piecing it back. Not for headlines. For me. Jules nods, no push, just listening. Mara shares a fragment. The night Ian spilled it all, her voice cracking once before firming. Confidence blooms, warm against the damp air outside. Afternoon, therapy session with Lena, the room's muted blues, a soft anchor. Mara recounts the cafe talk, hands gesturing animatedly, challenges met, not evaded. I felt exposed, but in control. Lena smiles faintly. That's the shift. Mara nods, anxiety ebbing into resolve. Evening montage accelerates. Mara at a community forum, rain pattering the venue windows, fielding questions from wary faces, colleagues, neighbors. I've lost trust before, she says, eyes meeting theirs. But I'm building it back, one honest step. No full dive into the journal's depths, just enough to connect, to be heard. Laughter with Lena over coffee later, a call from a restored friend. Heard your talk. Proud. The journal sits on her nightstand now, lock glinting under lamplight. Not a cage, but a choice. She stands at the window, city lights blurring in the mist, heart steady. Can she keep weaving this life? Honest, open, without the old fears claiming the reins? The night holds its breath.